Hello friends, welcome to my channel Together with Abhi. In this video, we are going to cover the security aspect of S3. There are two aspects for security. One is security of the cloud, the other is security in the cloud. So when we talk about security of the cloud, we mean the management of the infrastructure by AWS, and which helps you achieve good durability and availability. So the availability zones that are created by AWS, they have been created by keeping some factors in mind, like what are the the earthquake zones that availability zone falls into, and there are multiple different geographical aspects that they have taken care into account, just to ensure that not all availability zones go down at the same time. Also, durability aspect matches the data replication, how good or how much data replication are they doing. Okay, so this is all managed by AWS. But what concerns to us is there are so many services provided by AWS, and how do we use those services, okay, to manage the security of our data. Okay, so this is security within the cloud, in the cloud, which is managed by a user itself. So this is kind of a shared responsibility between AWS and a AWS user on how to manage the data security. Okay, so for the in the cloud security, there are multiple mechanisms. One mechanism is data protection using encryption, which we are going to cover in the next video, and it provides you different ways like client side and server side mechanisms. But what we are going to concentrate our focus in this video today is about identity and access management. So the purpose is going to be, we have already told you about access control list at object and bucket level. There is a bucket policy, user policy. I know we have already talked a little in fragments in the past video, but when to use what is the most important question that we must be asking. Okay, so the target of this video is, at the end of this video you will be able to answer which security mechanism should we be using at what place. Okay, there are other mechanisms like MFA delete. So if in case you are unintentionally deleting something or someone is trying to delete, you have a one more layer of security, which is multi-factor authentication, and there is versioning as well. So let's get started. There are a few concepts that we must know before starting, that all resources like buckets and objects are private by default. So just not these two resources, but even the sub resources like ACLs, everything is private by default. Okay. Only the resource owner and not the IAM user, but the account that created the user owns and can access the resource. So who is the rightful owner? It is not the person who has created, or the user, IAM user, who has created the resource for you, but it is the account owner who created the IAM user, which subsequently created the resource, is the resource owner. Okay, so important to note, it is not IAM user but the account user who owns the resource. Okay, and this resource owner only has the rights to provide access or grant permission to anyone else in the world. Okay, how does it provide access? So firstly, it answers two questions: to whom it has to provide access and what kind of permissions can it grant. Okay, so it does it based on access policies. Now these access policies are further segregated into two parts. One is resource based policies and the other is user policy. Resource based policies concern resources like bucket and operation, and at the bucket level we have two ways of handling it. One is through ACL, the other is bucket policy. Bucket policy is written in JSON, whereas ACLs are written in XML. Object level only has mechanism for ACL, and then there are user policies which are done in IAM service. As part of IAM service, we can create user policies, which are again written in XML. So we are going to cover this. Another important concept which I wanted to emphasize is, let's say you have an account owner A. She creates a user C, okay, which is an IAM user, and this user C creates a bucket. Okay, now we need to understand who is the rightful owner of this bucket. It is C or A. So the answer is A. A is going to be the resource owner of bucket. Now this owner A, account owner A, it grants permission to another account owner B to create objects within its bucket. Okay, so the object has been created by B. So who is going to be the owner of object B, object which has been created in the bucket? Is it D or A or C? So the owner is going to be B. B is going to be the resource owner for object. So it has the rights to allow someone to do any kind of activities on this object. But the account owner for B, for bucket, will be A. Okay, because she is paying the bills, she also has, additional rights. She may override account owner B's decision to deny someone the right to, access object. Okay, so it can deny account owner A because she is the owner of bucket. Though she is not the owner of object, she still has the right to deny, delete, and change the lifecycle policies concerned with object. Okay, so important thing to note here. Now let's say if in case a request is made, firstly an authentication check is done, and based on that authentication check, it is established whether that user is authenticated or an anonymous user. If in case it is an anonymous user, AWS provides a canonical ID, something like this, to an anonymous user. So you know that this is pertains to an anonymous user. Okay. So now let's see how S3 evaluates access control. Okay. So there are three levels to it: user context, bucket context, and object context. What user context establishes is the parent account of the IAM user, whether he or she has allowed the user some kind of grants or not. Okay, so this is established in the user context. It is only for an IAM user, not for the root credentials. User context doesn't come in picture for root credentials. Only in case of an IAM user, it provides a mechanism through user policy whether I am allowing my user, my IAM user, to have some kind of permissions or not. Okay, bucket context pertains to bucket level. Okay, through use of bucket policies and bucket ACL, the bucket owner sets these policies to allow or deny someone the permission to the bucket. Okay, and then there is the object context. This is the object owner allowing or denying someone, you know actually doesn't deny it, only allows someone the permission to its object. But as in the last diagram I told you, still bucket owner has the final say whether this person can be denied or not. Okay, so it has the rights to deny. The right to allow to an object is with an object owner. Now there are two ways how Amazon S3 authorizes a request for a bucket operation and for an object operation. So firstly, let's do it for a bucket operation. Everything is available on AWS document. I am actually referring to this AWS documentation only, so you can go and get this, read this from there as well. So the way it works is, firstly a user request is made. If in case it is an IAM user, as I told you, only in case of IAM user, a user context check is done, in which case the account owner of the user will verify whether I have allowed this user or not. If in case this user has been authorized for some kind of bucket operation, the bucket context comes into picture, wherein the bucket owner now checks whether this account user has been allowed or not. So bucket context come into picture at that time. So we are going to see few examples already available on AWS documentation. The bucket operation is already requested by the bucket owner. Okay, so bucket owner is the same account. uh, there is no need for IAM user or something, so no user context come into play. This bucket context, based on the bucket context, it establishes whether the owner has the permission or not, and that's why the access has been granted. This is a very simple way. Now let's see example 2. So the bucket operation has been requested by an AWS account that is not the bucket owner. So now the root account, the root user credentials are used. There is no IAM user. So no IAM context comes into play, but the bucket context comes into play, and the bucket owner is different from the account which is requesting the bucket operation. That is why bucket context establishes whether I am allowing this different account through my policies or through my ACL to access my bucket or not. Okay, so this only bucket context comes into play. The next is bucket operation is requested by an IAM user whose parent AWS account is also the bucket owner. So now there is no different account. There is a user, there is a bucket, but both of them are owned by the single account. So in this place, user context would come into play. A user context would check in the user policy whether I'm allowing this user or not, and bucket context will also come into play, but since this is from the same account, both of these steps are done at the same time only. Okay. However, if in case the bucket operation is requested by an IAM user whose parent AWS account is not the bucket owner, okay, so now you see here there is an IAM user called Jill. Its parent account is 1111. The bucket owner is different, its account is 2222. So firstly, user context would come into play. Account 111 will check its user policy and tell whether I am allowing Jill to access this bucket or not. Okay. So if in case it allows, then the bucket owner, which is 2222, will check its policies, ACL and bucket policy, and see whether this user from this account is allowed or not. And based on this, the authorization happens. Okay, so this is mainly how the bucket operation happens. Now, in case of object operation, an object context also comes into play. So, as usual, a user request would be done for an IAM user, and based on the user context, we authorize it or deny it. Now, at the bucket level, please note it is mentioned explicitly denied. It doesn't have the rights to allow, but it has the rights to deny. Whether I deny accessing of object which is created by a different account but is within the bucket which I have created. Okay. So user context, the user will tell whether, sorry, the account owner will tell whether I allow my user to authorize or not. Bucket owner then checks whether I deny this user for the access of the object or not. And finally, at the object context, the object owner tells whether I am allowing this user to access my resources or not. Okay. So let's take an example. There are three accounts. One is a Jill user, which is an IAM user. The parent account is 1111. There is bucket. The parent account is 2222, and there is an object within this bucket, but the owner of the object is 3333. Because IAM user is in the picture, that's why a user context. So what AWS account 1111 will do, it will check its user policy and see whether I'm allowing Jill to access this object or not. Okay. Based on that, it will go to bucket policy. Now, bucket owner 2222 will check its policies and say whether I have denied this person or not. In case it has denied, the request comes to an end there itself. But if in case it allows, then it goes to object. And now the object owner, which is 3333, will check whether I am allowing the access to my object to this user or not. Okay. So these are basically the main operations. Now I believe we have an understanding of how AWS is authorizing different operations. But there is an important question. We have different mechanisms. We have object ACL, bucket ACL, and bucket policy. But when to use when is an important thing. So when to use an object ACL, you have to use an object ACL if in case it is the only way to manage the objects not owned by the bucket owner. Okay. Because if in case the account owner is different for bucket and object, in that case you would need to use object ACL. Second important thing is, bucket policy only covers operations related to bucket. So if in case your object needs some explicit permission which is not covered under the blanket of bucket policy or bucket ACL, in that case you would need to use object ACL. Okay. So object ACL provides you more granular permission granting and not granting at object level. Okay. And basically if in case it is owned by a different account, then you need to use it. When to use bucket ACL? There are multiple things. One is to allow public access, which is one important thing, but the most important use case is if in case you want that in my bucket certain logs can be created or not. So Amazon S3 creates a user called as log delivery group, If in case you want to allow this delivery group to create log within your bucket, it is the best use case of bucket ACL, and we will see it in the console. Okay, so here what it says is, please allow this group S3 log delivery group to write within my bucket. Okay, but important point to note is ACL support only finite set of operations. Okay, ACL has very limited operations, as you would see. Okay, it has just read, write, list objects, only limited operations, and it doesn't provide these operations to be done at a very sub resource or a granular level the way bucket policies can allow. So the best way is to use bucket policy. Bucket policy allows you to do granular level operations at subgroups at a very you can provide different kind of permissions, and I will show you how. Okay, so let's go back to our AWS management console, and I'll show you where these things can be done and where is it located and how it needs to be done. Firstly, I just wanted to give you a quick reference where I was referring to all these diagrams. So you can always refer to AWS documentation. It has all the diagrams that I was referring to. So you can go to these pages. Okay, it has everything that I was referring to. Now let's go to S3 management console. I've already created a bucket with the name together with AWS security and an object called as index.html. So bucket policy and ACL, bucket ACL are accessed through permissions. Okay, so here we have access control list. Now you see, as I mentioned, access control list can do only finite set of operations, which are list objects, write objects, and these two. Okay, please note, bucket ACL would sorry, an object ACL would be a little different. It would allow some more or some less operations to be done. Now what you can do is you can provide public access, you can provide some access to some other account, and the S3 log delivery group that I was talking about in the slide. Okay, so these are finite operations that you can do, but you cannot do some kind of sub resources access deny. That can only be done using bucket policy. So if in case you go to policy generator, which I already have opened here, you see you have so many options within this. Even if you select this, there are so many options to granularly access or deny something. You can also give some kind of conditions. Okay, whether you want to allow not like, ARN not like, if exist, all these things. Okay, so bucket policies are the way to go if in case you want to have some granular level permissions at bucket level. These could deny object level access. Okay, but if in case you have object level permissions need to be set and it is owned by a different account, then you need to go and set it on an object level. Okay, and it is the ACLs which are given here. Again, you see it doesn't have as many operations even as the bucket level ACL had. Okay, so you just can add account and see whether I'm allowing this person to access my resources and which kind of resources, sub resources, but only these three operations on my resources. Okay, so it has limited use case. So the bucket policies are the main thing to go. Now talking about the user policy, it is set in the IAM service, which we are going to cover as a different module altogether. So within IAM you can actually write a user policy, and it tells you what all permissions I'm granting to my user to do for some kind of a resource. Okay, so the combination of all these three would help you to tackle the security of your data, to whether authorize someone, some user, or some root credentials to access a resource or not. I hope with this theoretical lecture you have been able to grasp in detail the way AWS manages or authorizes the request, which is quite important, very important to understand how this works. I hope you like the video. Please, if in case you did, please like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for your time.